And now I would like to invite Marit Parlovita from ISOC. She will be the moderator for the next session that is about competition in a data-driven world and the question how to ensure sustainable development. Marit, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra. Can we go an hour? Yeah. Okay. We're running a bit late, so just wanted to make sure that we have that full hour. I would like to invite our speakers directly to the stage here. We have today a very competent panel. So we have Levan Kopakidze from Beeline. We have Piers O'Donoghue from the European Commission. Martina Ferracane from European Centre for International Political Economy. Piret Urb from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Estonia. And Jean Gonier from Lyon. Please, if the speakers could come to the stage already. I don't know, there's no signs. Right. So as Sandra mentioned, we're going to today talk about competition in a data-driven world and how to ensure sustainable growth. So this session is really all about data and data as a source of economic growth, and discussing how data, what kind of role data plays in the digital economy today. And as we all know, this is a big topic, so we all hear about data every day. There's personal data, non-personal data, big data, machine-generated data, open data. So it can get very complex in terms of policy making as well. And we try to focus this session, as we only have 1 hour, on really the economic aspects of data, and especially on the value of data. So where does the value of data come from? What are the different ways to monetize data for the different stakeholders, whether governments or private sector? And also then, what kind of policy framework do we need in order to create a competitive market in the area of data? And the final aspect I would like to highlight is that we're here today in Tbilisi, in Georgia. So in the EU and in Brussels, there's been a lot of talk about data in the last year due to quite a hectic and busy policy agenda. But it's also very important that we, I think, touch on the cross-border aspects today. So how do we make sure that data also moves between the European Union and then other European countries in the wider neighborhood? So without any further ado, I would like to ask Levan Kopakidze, from Chief Digital Officer from Beeline Georgia, to give us a little example on how private sector is using data and provide some use cases from the ISP, so Internet Service Provider point of view. Levan, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm a Chief Digital Officer of Beeline Georgia. You all know that this is part of the VEON group that is presented in 12 countries and serving more than 230 million customers. So today I'm going to talk about the competition in a data-driven world and how to drive the sustainable growth. So I'm going to start with this. So this is what happens in the internet in a minute. So this is the latest report, and as you can see from the slides, numbers are so enormous that it can be shown only in a 60 seconds time scale. And according to latest McKinsey report, there are more than 250 billion, 2.5 billion digital customers globally that are under 25. So, and the fact, what characterizes this group is that they are always on. And also they have completely different usage behavioral patterns as compared to traditional analog customers. There is also the trend, the mobile-only access, which is coming. And this basically, just to give you an example, over half of the users are visiting their accounts of Facebook via mobile devices. And also this trend contributes to the 2019 projection, where almost 2 billion users will transact by their mobile devices. So we all see what's the kind of internet impact, which obviously also is impacting the telecom industry. Well, telecom industry has a pretty tough time. 75% of all telecom operators are expressing their concerns that over-the-top players like Viber, WhatsApp, and all the other applications are getting revenues out of them. So it's mostly declining voice revenues and transferring the messaging activities from traditional SMS to online messaging. So basically, how we tackle that, right? We as a telecom operator, we're trying to have a couple of major directions in order to sustain and drive the growth and use this data, right? Because telecom has plenty of data available, structured and unstructured, but the key fact is to get deeper into this, analyze, and use it effectively. So our strategy considers 4 major directions. The first is enriching customer profiles. This is basically analyzing customers not just with the SMSs, minutes, and megabytes, but also understanding what's their behavioral patterns based on their data usage. Well, obviously, this is just a pattern analysis, and that this has nothing to do with the personal analysis. And based on that, to basically give them what they want and when they want it. So that's our key objective when it comes to the offering, right? We even, as a group, created our own personal internet platform, which we call VEON, which is kind of rival for the WhatsApps and Vibers. And we launched it in Georgia also, reaching more than 500,000 downloads already. And that's what we use as a separate channel to interact with customers also. The second is basically more customer touchpoints. So the new technologies like IoT and chatbots and also self-service terminals and all other channels like mobile apps and online channels give us more ways to interact with customers and give them information and be pretty smart about serving them and also getting them what they want, right? And the next is enriching just a simple telco bundles with not just telco products, but also free apps and also the third-party offers. So we reached almost 20 different exclusive offers, which is from the various industries like entertaining, food, and other industries, and we got some exclusive discounts and offers from them, and we're trying to enrich that and create the bundle which is more enhanced. And this is one of the strategies how we differentiate ourselves against competitors. And the last one is remarketing. So we were the first ones who deployed in Georgia the customer subscriber onboarding channel, which is a pure online channel, and customers can start a process via online channel. Let's say if they are stuck in the middle, our objective is to go back to them and basically give them the tailor-made offer in order to push them and help them to complete the whole process. So I'm going to present only 3 use cases, specific use cases, just to help you understand what is exactly that we're doing with this data. So this is the time-based offer, enriched telco bundles, and customer onboarding. So let's start with the first. So this slide is pretty packed, but I'll explain in easier words. So we obviously know when the lunchtime is. This is kind of public information. Everybody knows about this. And we also know when is the heavy consumption time of our digital channels, like mobile apps. So by simply using those like generally available data, we can basically be smart and basically have the happy hours lunchtime sent as a offer inside our channel during the lunchtime, and also, let's say when customers are out of the data, send them directly on that specific time the new package of bundles, like new package of data for purchase. And obviously we're using our self-care app, which is our own, and also our own personal internet platform to have all this displayed in a very smartly manner. So we're only using our own channels in order to be proactive about our activities. Next is the enriched telco bundles. So we obviously, we look at the data, analyze as aggregated segments, and we understand what percentage of our users are just using their SIM cards for just calling. Some of them are heavy data users. Some of them use it more extensively for video and music streaming. And by these general attributes, we're trying to be very smart about offering. So somebody who is not interested with let's say, with data and is only using the SIM cards just for calling, we're not going to have a tailor-made voice bundles for, the data bundles for them, right? So that's exactly how we are careful about giving people what they want and be smart about the pricing in order to give customers exactly the price that they want to pay and for what they want to pay for. And the next and the last use case is customer onboarding and remarketing. As I said, we have an online channel. We have some tariff plans that is available only through digital channels. And once customer starts the onboarding process, and let's say remotely, he was not able to finish the whole process, we can go back to them and help them and offer the same pre-selected tariff plan with a discount, or just ask if they had any problems during this onboarding process. So this is also the objective is to serve customers in a better way. Basically, I want to talk a little about the technologies that we adapt on also. Well, we know that the IT, which has the separate session today, is a huge topic, and we are also trying to adapt on the IoT devices. But also the next key direction is natural language processing and machine learning. So we're happy that we have a couple of vendors locally that also started to analyze Georgian language, which we all know that it's pretty tough, and they have this unique natural language processing, and that helps us to basically use this very effectively in our online channels. I'm talking about the chatbots and call centers, and basically have this used effectively in order to serve our customers. These chatbots are already capable to not just answer to the questions, but also offer the top-up or purchasing some of the products that telco offers. So this is the kind of full flow that these automatic machines can can offer customers. Well, that's pretty much it. This is what I wanted to talk about from the business perspective. And now my colleagues will probably continue with the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Levan. Thank you. So we hear that data has enabled you to basically launch new services, to better tailor your offerings to customers, and also even enter to the world of artificial intelligence. Do we have any questions or immediate comments to Levan regarding his presentation at this stage? Okay, if there's nothing at this stage, you will have a chance to ask questions later. I would like to introduce you my co-moderator, Tiona Turashvili. Tiona? There you go. So she will be roaming in the audience, and you can also give your questions to her, and we will be taking them after the first round with the panel. And in the end, we will have Ana Maria Correa, who is sitting there, who is taking notes, and we will leave some 5 to 10 minutes in the end to review and come up with some conclusive statements. I would now like to go back to the panel. And Piers, perhaps you would like to start from the point of view of the European Commission and to talk about the data opportunity and the biggest challenges as well as it comes to the data economy. Please.
Okay, thank you. Seems to be on. Hello, yes. Thank you very much, Marit. Good morning, and thank you. Yes, I think my preliminary intervention would be a complement to what we've just heard about the importance and use of data by telcos, because a lot of what the European Union is doing now with regards to the data economy is seeking to promote the development and uptake of new technologies and data technologies by the whole economy. So sometimes I say to the people in the Brussels bubble, it's about everybody except the telcos now. It's not an ICT issue anymore. That's been the focus of our data economy work over the last 2 years because of the importance of data to the economy, because it is a key element of the new technologies, and because it's improving that data economy really allows us to drive down costs for SMEs. But a starting premise that we've had, and this is in relation to one of the key measures that Marit was alluding to earlier on, is that we can't really talk about the importance and value and use of data if we don't actually have a free flow of data. And our primary target has been to ensure that the European single market, that economy of 28 member states plus the European Economic Area countries, is a single data space. And surprisingly, perhaps, it is not. There are still restrictions, there are still localization requirements on data of differing degrees in different member states. And the proposal, the legal proposal, which is at a final stage of negotiation, we hope to have agreement very soon, would seek to remove, to actually ban member states from imposing data localization requirements, except in the very extreme cases of national security. So that for us is a precondition. But we've been doing a lot of work, and I could go through them at great length, but just to hit what I think are the most important issues for this discussion, is that we have to also, and coming back now towards the first presentation, we have to ensure a certain degree of transparency, openness, or even fairness in the relationship between platforms, particularly when they are in a market-dominant position, and businesses who use those platforms and who generate data which is sometimes captured by the platform, which really is data that is critical for the business case of the individual companies that are buying and selling services or seeking to access their customers. That data is in fact in some cases of greater value than the initial service, it has been said. And while we are very reluctant to regulate in this area, what we do want to do is to ensure that there is a level playing field. We do have our competition rules that can come into force in extreme cases, but what we're trying to do is we are trying to create a situation in which it is recognized that businesses need to cooperate so that we will only tackle the most extreme cases where there are abuses or where it is clearly not to the benefit of the economy if somebody is capturing and retaining or taking the value of somebody else's data. So we're building that on 3 pillars. It is not regulation, but our Platforms to Business initiative seeks to improve transparency, also to improve dispute resolution, and also to create an observatory so that we and member states can intervene more quickly if there are more serious abuses. There are a number of other things that we're doing. We must remember that governments and local authorities hold huge amounts of valuable data. And so we have an old piece of legislation called the Public Service Information Directive, which we have just proposed to update and modernize. And what we want to achieve is that high-value data sets will become much more accessible to businesses and SMEs, for them to generate new business models, for them to exploit and create even more value out of that data, some of which will then feed straight back into the provision of more targeted and efficient public services. And that is something which, even when we talk about the economic value of data, we must continue to also think about the public value, the value to the public of data. And particularly when, as a taxpayer, the citizen has paid for the service or has paid for the data once, as it were, we must also ensure that there is a situation where that data is not then captured by one company and used or resold at very high cost, none of which then accrues back to the taxpayer. So this is something which we're addressing in our Public Sector Information Directive. We have also given guidelines on what we think would be a level playing field for access between businesses. That's business-to-business access. Again, something which is best treated by contract, but where we do have the fallback position if there are serious inequalities, if there are serious abuses where we can use competition law. But we'd much prefer not to be in that situation. We'd much prefer that in recognizing the pent-up value, that we should stimulate and encourage businesses on commercial terms to nevertheless release that data in order for it to be reused, in order for greater value to be created in the wider economy. So those are some of the issues, and I haven't dealt with all of them, that we are facing at the moment, that we are trying to face up to in the European Union. Marit, you did also, of course, mention international data flows. That is, of course, a very important issue. We are just testing our new enthusiasm for this issue in some recent international trade agreements, and the European Union hopes that we can come to a position very quickly where data flows automatically become part of any standard free trade agreement because of what we see as the mutual benefit. But there are issues, there are problems, there are concerns in some elements in some areas of the world about the security of that data. There are also concerns about whether a trading partner might use certain rules to restrict their own data market. And of course, we have to face up to the fact that the European Union has been accused of protectionism in introducing the GDPR. And that's a discussion which we can confront head on, because we're very clear about why we have the GDPR. But it is to say that others would also say that the rules that we have on personal data protection, which we stand for and which we are very proud of, nevertheless create barriers. And so we have a more complex system for adequacy agreements when it comes to personal data. So I know that that has to be part of the discussion. That is why it isn't something that can happen as quickly as what we hope will happen with regard to free flow of data within the European Union. I'll stop there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Piers. I'm sure you have loads of questions to Piers, but I would suggest that we do the first round and then we take the questions. Martina Ferracane has done quite some research on the data economy. Martina, would you like to go next?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what Piers was talking about in relation to restriction to data flows. And actually, when it comes to challenges on the data economy, I think one of the main restrictions we have today is this increasing fragmentation of the internet in a way that is led by the fact that countries are imposing more and more restrictions on movement of data. And when we talk about restrictions on data flows, there are different types of restrictions and different ways of calling these restrictions. Some people are talking about data localization. In the WTO, data localization is a different issue from what we talk about, so there's a lot of also lack of understanding. And I would argue, to simplify the discussion, that there are 4 types of restrictions mainly. The most restrictive ones are bans to transfer data cross-border. So banning movement of data means that you cannot even transfer a copy of the data abroad. And this is usually these restrictions are applied, for example, on health data. In Australia, there's these kind of restrictions. Another type of restriction are local processing requirement, which means that the main processing of data is to be done in the country in which data is taken from. And you see this kind of restrictions, for example, in Russia with the privacy law. And in these cases, a copy of the data can leave the country. So there is still a way for the company to transfer a copy of the data, for example, to the headquarters. Then what you have is local storage requirements, which are basically the requirement to keep only a copy of the data locally. And in this case, usually this regulation, for example, in Europe, are for accounting data. So the company is required to keep a copy of the accounting data locally. Or you also see it for law enforcement reasons. So communication data, metadata needed to be kept locally for access by local authorities. And then you have conditional flows. So the case of the GDPR, in which data can go abroad, but only certain conditions are fulfilled. For example, adequacy or consent of the data subject. And we see the number of measures like those that are applied globally are rising incredibly fast. We see today over 100 of these measures being implemented. And the big question here is, why are these measures being implemented, and why do we see a rise of implementation? One reason is definitely privacy. Also, I would argue that a lot of measures which are imposed under the policy objective of privacy are not actually ensuring more privacy for the data subject. Another reason is national security. And for example, we see in the case of China and Russia, a lot of measures are justified under the national security objective. Another can be cybersecurity. For example, critical infrastructure need to be protected, so we need to keep data locally so that we are more resilient in case of a cyber attack. Or what we see is also, especially in developing countries, taxation being seen as a reason. So we need to keep data locally. In this way, companies have to use local data centers, and in this way we can tax these companies. And also we see more broadly a general reasoning of economic development, especially in developing countries, in which that are arguing that if we keep data locally, then it's easier for our companies to make use of this data, to leverage on this data, to grow in our country. There, the point is, do these measures really achieve these policy objectives that countries are talking about? And this is really what I think the discussion should be about, on whether keeping data locally makes actually the country more secure, and whether it makes data more private. In the case of the GDPR, for example, I think that by asking an extra consent for sending data outside Europe, you're not really ensuring the privacy of the data subject. Or in the case of Russia, by keeping data locally, processing data locally, you're not making the country more secure for a national security perspective. Or especially for developing economies, just processing data in local data centers does not make companies more able to use this data to create wealth in the country. So I think this is a big challenge, and I think transparency and open dialogue on why we want our data to be kept locally will help in overcome this problem.
Very good, thank you, Martina. I think that's a nice bridge to our next speaker. So are these kind of restrictions and barriers really beneficial for countries? We have Piret Urp here from Estonia. Estonia is, of course, a bit of a legend in Europe in terms of the high level of digitalization and innovation. So Piret, how does Estonia deal with data?
Hi, good morning. Is it working, the mic? Okay. I will offer you a few ideas from the point of view of the state, as my last 15 years I've been working for the state, actually. So, yeah, just to pick up a last point from next to me, that Estonia is not keeping all the data of the state locally anymore. So there are some other means also taken on board already. But from the point of view of state, what I would like to emphasize, how to relate it to the data and relate it to data economy. The important point is how to keep data safe, how to take advantage of data. As the title of our panel is also consisting word competition, so how to ensure that the state would be competitive enough. So the most important element there is education, actually. So this is something what Estonia and Estonian politicians have been doing for a long time. I think quite before than many other countries, they understood that in order to take advantage of this data economy, there have to be enough people who are competent in keeping data safe, how to handle the data, how to manage the data of the state. So there has to be educational system which supports that, actually. So in most of countries, we have experienced that the education systems are a bit old, that it's a field which is very conservative usually, which is difficult to modernize, and it's difficult to change. But this is something number one what every state should think about, actually. And the second point what I would like to bring out is a trust. How to create the trust between the state and the people. So the people are not gonna use the data, or people are not gonna give their own data if there is no trust between the government and the people. So our government has also done a lot in this point of view. For example, all the names and the phone numbers and email addresses of all civil servants are available on the websites of the state institutions, and not only this contact information but also the salaries actually. So the state is really transparent, which is a point how to create the trust between the citizens and the state, so that both sides could really take advantage of the data. And the data that the state owes about people, about every person, is also visible to the person through this electronic ID card that every Estonian has. So you still have control on your data, and you can access it with your ID card from anywhere, anytime, and you see what the state has actually. So your important is that you still are the owner of your own data, and you can also feel your privacy is protected. So there has been created a lot of trust related to the transparency. It's also that the companies can see that as the state is very transparent, they also trust their data to the state. So as there are the tax declarations, as everything is done online, so the economic sector can be sure that there's no corruption, because you never need to go to the official in a certain state institution and talk to or bribe someone or the things like that. So it's everything is digital, everything is online, which ensures the same rules and the equal treatment for everybody. And as the data is kept safe, also this is how it really helps for the economy. And the last point what I could make, as our time is very, very limited here, is just to introduce you the last innovation by the state, which is e-residency actually. We have a person in the panel who is an e-resident of Estonia, which doesn't mean that the e-residents are getting the citizenship of Estonia, but they get the access to many state services, and they can create EU registration company in Estonia, and they get the ID card, which is electronic, so they can use their digital signature and the things like that. So this is like a last innovation by the state actually. So this is all available on the website if someone is more interested in or ask the details from a practical point of view from the person next to me who is e-resident of Estonia. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to all the questions. So thanks.
Thank you, Piret. So indeed, Martina is an e-resident of Estonia. We had a discussion yesterday, and she has a company in Estonia, as I understood, and is also paying her taxes in Estonia, although she lives in Brussels or Italy? Ah, Germany, okay. So it is indeed a way also for governments to be innovative, to attract investment and those precious tax euros. So our final speaker today is Jean Cognier from Vion. Jean, your comments, please. Yes. What does data mean to Vion?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes, it does work? Okay, thanks. So thanks for this invitation. Yeah, now it does work. And so what is good when you are the last speaker is that I think you really want me to make very, very short. It was short initially, but now very short, given the time and the fact that we would like to have questions with the audience. And also, I will not make a wrap-up, this is your job, but I will not say what has been said already, which is also better in terms of time. Because, of course, I wanted to discuss and to address data flow, but I will make it very short. No, maybe we should have started with this, but just would like to bring a definition, because our session today is also about sustainable growth. How can you ensure this? And sustainability, sorry, is a very interesting word. And just look at what is the definition of this word. I think we can say that this is using a resource so that this resource is not permanently damaged. This is the idea for me of the topic today. So the question is, how can we ensure that as a resource, data is not damaged or misused? And we had good examples of this before. So the most tricky question is, how can we ensure that data growth profit to the maximum players, to the maximum stakeholders all over the world? Of course, and I will not reiterate that, data flow is one of the effects, especially from the European Commission, and I think they are correct, that can prevent competition, because legal limitation on data flow and data localization is indeed preventing competition in today's world. The question is, and we discussed this already, is why do we think that this is indeed not good for competition and for the economic growth? Of course, some countries want to limit this because of security reasons, and this is one of the reasons, by the way, that the Commission can accept. But the most interesting is that in those countries, the restriction has been put in place to promote domestic innovation, precisely to promote their own local growth of data versus the global growth of data. So it's a kind of competition on data growth at domestic level. But what is also interesting is not only, of course, at state level, government level, but also at companies level. And today, data and analytics clearly are changing the competition framework. Today, a leading company can use its asset to launch a new business model. And this has always been the case, but today the network effect on digital platform creates a kind of a winner-takes-it-all paradigm, dynamic, that is not easy for others to compete with. This is where data has really an important value. So this is a very complex and evolving issue. Evolving is certainly the most important word as well today, if we want to ensure this growth. And I'm about to finish, so that's really a short one. But what I really wanted to say at this moment is that we can, of course, many things can be done. We can imagine and hope sustainable growth. If we can be in a position to establish a level playing field. This word is not a catch-up word, it's a very important one. And this type of field can be achieved if lawmakers can understand that the functioning of the data value chain is very important. I think most of the time there is a misunderstanding from the lawmakers about the data value chain. So basically about the understanding of the way data is collected, stored and analyzed. So if there is this understanding of this value chain from data collection, storage and analysis, I think this would really change quite a lot and help a lot this sustainable growth. And of course, to help this, we need to be in a position to put in place a constant and permanent dialogue between all stakeholders, representative of the state, companies, and NGOs and other stakeholders. So that's very good because this is what EuroDiG is precisely for. So this is today also an opportunity for us to engage on this dialogue next year as well in Netherlands. But this is again very important to be in a constant discussion all together on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Very interesting. So from the private sector perspective, we hear the data value chain, nice concept. So starting to see how we can create markets and different markets around data. I would now like to open the discussion to the audience. We need debate in the room. We want to also have your questions and inputs and views. Tiona, do you have any questions from the audience at this stage?
Not yet.
Do we have any questions to the panel? Please, could we have a mic here?
Hello, thank you for the interesting panel. My name is Dariel, and the question is, first of all, to Mrs. Biret, and then to Mrs. Martina. Here's the question. I know about the process of Estonia incorporating its own state-owned cryptocurrency. So my question is, what are the main advantages of having such a state-owned cryptocurrency for the country like Estonia, and what would be the special benefits for e-residents? Like, that's the question to Martina, actually. I'm really interested, what are the advantages here, because it's all about data, you know, and I'm really interested, how can that create growth in your cases? Thank you.
Direk, would you like to comment first, and then Martina?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this good question. Related to cryptocurrency, as you know, Estonia has been quite innovative last, I don't know, 10, 15 years already. So as this is the last innovation of the world, Estonia had to pick it up immediately. So this is this is a key, and we have to try all the economic advantages to see is there something useful for us, and how to make it work for our economy, how to boost the economy through that, and how to be more competitive as a country in the world, and how to ensure the growth. So all these modern things, this is how the state sees them. That if there's something, if it's worth it to try, we just go for it. And as I mentioned earlier, that we have now quite a good bunch of people who have studied ICT, data, how to manage it, how to keep it safe, all these things. So this is just how it is. But related to e-residency, this is again related to the economy. That if there are the people, for example, who want to create a company in any other country than their own country, why not would it be Estonia, for example? But it is again useful for our state. And yeah, just for the background, that it's not the most easy to get e-residency. It's still that you have to apply, there are certain conditions and all that, but it is an opportunity for you. And we are also interested in this knowledge and experience what these people are bringing to Estonia. So thanks. Maybe Martina, you can say something from a practical point of view, or what are the advantages you've got through that, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, about cryptocurrency, I actually was not aware that Estonia is their own cryptocurrency.
Yeah, Estcoin.
Okay. What I knew is that Estonia is running a lot of the services from the government on the blockchain, which is a different thing than cryptocurrency. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, I am ambivalent. I don't yet see the direct benefit to consumers and to people of these services, and I see yet, as of today, still as just a sort of source of speculation. But I do see a lot of services being created on the blockchain, also with through the use of cryptocurrencies that can bring advantages to consumers. For example, you have some cases in the US of companies that are paying their employees by using cryptocurrencies. If the employees are actually from a different country than the country which they are working. So, for example, in the US, there are a lot of Mexican people, and they're receiving their salary in Mexican pesos rather than in US dollars. And that by using blockchain technology, they don't pay conversion exchange, the interest in the conversion. So there are some applications that might be beneficial to people, but the problem there is that if you go in the financial markets, they're like the problems in terms of also sustainability and risks of using cryptocurrency for mainstream economy are significant. So yeah, but I think on the other side, looking at blockchain as a source of ensuring also that there is transparency on transfer of rights in general, like also on contracts, can be much better applications than cryptocurrency per se. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Martina and Piret. Do we have any other questions? Please.
My name is Jörg Schweiger, I'm with DENIC, and I'd like to ask specifically the Commission, but the panelists as well. Very recently, a new concept has been coming up, and that is taxation on data. So what do you think about that? Specifically, Commission again, please.
Yes, please.
I assume you ask your question the way you wanted to phrase it. Taxation on data is not something I'm familiar with. Are you talking about a digital tax that the Commission was proposing?
No, I'm not saying that the Commission was proposing something, but as a lot of societies and governments just realized that a lot of money can be made with data and that consumers are paying services with their data, it has been asked as a new concept, no matter or no idea how it's going to be implemented, but there has been coming up the concept that taxation could help us in, well, regulation of data flows, or I just don't know, taxation on data, that was the concept.
Okay. Well, the fact is that we have done our analysis, which has brought us down a different path, which is that we do have significant large companies which are multinational in nature, who are generating significant turnover and profit through their businesses in different countries without necessarily being taxable or paying tax in the country in which that economic activity takes place. So we have actually proposed, given quite a high threshold, that there should be the possibility for taxation in relation to that activity. On the data itself, on the other hand, we would see that as being potentially hugely a huge disincentive to the development of the data economy. And what's more, it would mean that the companies which are used to being taxed on the basis of the service they provide, their turnover or their revenues or their profits, would somehow find themselves in a situation of double taxation. So it's not something that we have looked at. It's not something which we would encourage, simply because we are in a situation in which our whole policy focus is on encouraging the take-up and development of data technologies. And I go back to the very first point I made, because of their benefit for all sectors of the economy in the modernization and digitization of economy and society.
Thank you. Martina wanted to comment as well.
Yeah, about this taxation, there is a lot of discussion going on for like 15 years at the WTO on taxation on data, because the WTO, it was agreed, I think about a decade ago, that there is a moratorium on taxing data flow. So there is an agreement today among WTO members, which is basically the entire world, that there is not going to be, there cannot be a tax on data. Now, this moratorium is renewed every 2 years. So now the last renewal was in Argentina at the last ministerial meeting in December last year. And there was a lot of discussion about whether to renew this agreement, this commitment not to tax data, because mainly developing economies are seeing this as seeing the possible taxation of data as a way of gaining profits. And they see something coming from the West. It's a proposal coming from the West to make sure that American companies and Western companies can provide their services to developing countries without restrictions. On the other hand, what you have is Western companies that are arguing that this moratorium should actually become forever. So it should become, should not be renewed every 2 years, but we should basically agree globally that we are never going to tax data. And there is a lot of countries that are against it in the developing world. Now, I think the reason why they are also talking about it is that now with 3D printing, for example, some goods can be moved from one country to another through data. So you can transfer a model of a product through the computer, and you download it, and then you create a good. And in this case, basically, you are bypassing tariffs. But what I think is important there is to make sure that the discussion about data goes end to end with the discussion on services. I think that data should be seen as a part of a service, and therefore you should not see data per se as being taxable, but rather being taxable if it becomes a service and when it becomes a service. And for 3D printing, for example, moving a 3D file is called STL file between a country and another one does not mean that this file is going to become a good necessarily, because it still has to be 3D printed successfully. So we have to make sure that we don't tax simply data just because it's moved. I think it can be detrimental to the economy in general. Thanks.
Thank you. Jörg, did that answer your question? Thanks very much. Further questions? Do we have more questions from the audience? We still have time for 1 or 2 questions before you go for your coffee break, so this is your chance. Okay, so I had one question actually. So we've heard when we talk about in Europe about the data opportunity, and there's all these pieces of research that this will bring hundreds of billions of euros of extra economic growth and jobs alongside to Europe and to European citizens as well. So this is a question to all the panelists. So do you believe that Europe can, and Europe here, the EU and wider Europe, can deliver on this promise of data in the next 5 years? Yes or no? And whatever your answer, what would be the one key thing that we should solve in order to do that? Piers, would you like to start?
Damn it, I'm used to getting the last word. I genuinely do. You would expect me to say it, so how realistic. But honestly, we do believe. It's why we have invested so much in the policy. It is why the data economy package is such an important part of the overall digital single market strategy. It's because we must achieve these objectives of a data-based economy where there is a free flow, where, of course, those who generate data are able to and allowed to generate proper returns, where that has a critical business significance that they're allowed, of course, to protect that data, but that in the commercial frame we can, where possible, generate access to data so that it can be reused, so that it can generate new business models. We have seen already that large companies are very bad at exploiting the full value of their own data, and small dynamic startups are very good at doing that. So it's a win-win situation. We're already at the start of it. We have evidence from our own startup incubators that those SMEs that have access to open data are more successful, and it's empirical. So I think that we can do it, but I also know, and the Commission is convinced, that we must do it.
So we need to have all the stakeholders involved at all levels. So what about from the larger company perspective, Jean?
Yeah, thanks, and I would agree with what has been said. Of course, it's not an easy thing to say. What is more important is the job that will be created from this data. And I agree that SMEs have a key role to play. Beyond today, we are supporting a lot of SMEs all over the world, especially in Italy. So in Italy, we have a startup incubator with Luis University, Luis and Lab, that is both in Milan and in Roma. And hundreds of jobs have been created since this opened, and this is really a good sign of explaining how data and startup can effectively bring growth and create a job, and this can be a virtuous circle. So yes, I'm pretty positive about this.
Great, we have 2 yeses. Martina.
Yeah, let's bring the pessimism in the panel. Personally, I think that we are a bit overselling this digital single market thing in Europe. I think it definitely is a good thing to do and to look for a digital single market, but also I think that our package of a digital single market is not ambitious enough to make sure that Europe becomes a leader in the digital economy. And also, I think that when it comes to creation of jobs, we have to be very careful to say that more keeping data locally or exploiting better data or exploiting better digital economy is going to necessarily create jobs, because there is plenty of academic studies showing that actually digitalization is also destroying jobs, and mainly it is transforming jobs. So if we are not actually investing also in education and skilling of people and make sure that we are prepared to make the most, to remove people from jobs which become obsolete in the digital economy to jobs that are going to be created and transformed in the digital world, we are not going to see benefits being distributed in the old economy. So I think it's very important to focus not only on policies to create a digital single market, but also in policies that look at how can everybody benefit from the digital economy. And this starts with education, of course, but also with creating an environment for startups to thrive, like by supporting accelerator programs and programs to make sure that people can really also, in general, benefit. And redistribution is going to be also a big part of it, because, of course, you cannot prepare everybody to live in the digital economy, so you have also to make sure that those people that are going to be left behind are supported in this transition.
Okay, so we need a holistic approach, and we need some flexibility in the structures of our societies and economies. Very good. Piret, you have the last word.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marit, very much. For this question, I could only bring out the point that the data, we are in the situation already now that the data itself cannot do anything and cannot give enough. So it has to be combined with AI, actually. And this is where we are heading. The artificial intelligence has to be put together with the data. And through this combination, it has to be put like for the advantage of the countries and for the people, actually. So I would also like to be optimist here, but I would say that it depends also how much the business sector is able to push the governments, actually, the state, because usually the business sector is more innovative, more open-minded in this point of view, and they can function faster. So the government's regulations are taking a bit more time, but at the same time, there's no time if Europe wants to be competitive among the other very competitive continents and regions in the world. So I would say that data together with AI is the key that could create the jobs, actually. And of course, to create the jobs through that, the education systems need to be modernized, and as fast as possible, I would say. So thanks.
Okay, very good. So we are looking at more of a business-driven approach. So just to conclude on this round, we had 2 yeses and 2 yes-if, which I think is a very promising result. We have 5 minutes left now, so I would like to ask Anna Maria to, I don't know if you can post them on the wall. So she has been taking notes and some conclusions from the sessions, and in the tradition of EuroDiG, we should all have a kind of a consensus, overall consensus on the messages from this session. So would you like to present your conclusions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I tried to summarize this brilliant panel in 5 bullet points, and tell me if you agree or not, or if you have any comments to make. So, data is giving rise to a new economy. The impact of international data flows on economic growth has been larger than traditional traded goods. Favorable policy and regulation can enable data economy to increase even more in Europe and elsewhere. Competition in the data-driven world is global. Currently, there are 2.5 billion digital customers around the world. Almost 2 billion customers will transact through mobile devices. So VN and private companies have been using data to sustain and drive economic growth. The free flow of data is essential to the value of data. In Europe, there are still barriers to the flow of data, including national security. Europe has to secure a degree of transparency, openness, and fairness. In order to do that, it has created an observatory. There are competition rules that can come into force in extreme cases. Business needs to cooperate to help institutions to tackle abuses. Furthermore, data flows have become part of any standard free trade agreement. The European Union has been accused of protectionism, but the rules such as the GDPR aim to protect the citizens, even if it offers some barriers. developing and developed countries have been offering restrictions to the flow of data and imposing increasing restriction to the movement of data in 4 different ways. Bans to transfer data across borders, local processing requirements, national security and cybersecurity barriers, and taxation. And finally, sustainable growth depends on a fair playing field in terms of usage of data. So I don't know if you would like to.
I do have one additional remark, if I may. Yeah, thank you. So I think the last bullet was, I made it very close, so that's fine, just have one bullet, and this reflects what has been said. Just wanted to say that I prefer to use the word level playing field instead of fair playing field, okay? And then I think that's an important point that you made, Marit. I think it is worth adding the data value chain approach that I don't see here, that I mentioned to you, which is basically it's important that lawmakers and others understand the data value chain, which is, you know, from data collection, storage, and analysis of the data. This is really what data is about.
All right, sure, I will add on that.
Okay, thank you.
I would ask you to change one word in the 3rd bullet point where you say that there are barriers to the flow of data, including national security. If that's related to what I said, I would say other than national security, because the Commission has always recognized that for genuine national security reasons there may need to be some barriers. But it's the fact when there are not national security reasons that we have a major problem. So that would be the one word, or the couple of words I'd ask you to change. And then honestly, I took it as very sort of positive criticism of DSM. But what Martina and Pirat said at the end, the what ifs, the yes ifs, needing to work on digital transformation because other jobs will be lost, the need for digital skills, and of course the role of artificial intelligence. I think those are all very important things that we heard at the end.
Very good, thank you. So, did you manage to take those? Let's see if our audience is okay with this and the rest of our speakers. Any objections, any final comments? Melle? We can't really hear you, it's better to do it with the mic.
Sorry. In the 3rd bullet point, it says that data flows have become part of any standard free trade agreement. Maybe Martina can add to that, but I'm not sure if that's the case. So your 3rd bullet point, it says free flow of data have become part of free trade agreements. I don't think that's the case yet.
Yes, so it will maybe happen in the future that so it hasn't yet happened as such. So yes, just a minor.
Yeah,
final comments?
Also for me, but I can tell you also on the side, like the 4 types of restrictions are like you have bans, not bans, but it's local processing and also local storage and conditional flow. But I can like tell you more. Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any more hands. So I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much. And we have a coffee break now, so you can have your 2nd coffee of the morning. And I believe the next session will start on the hour at 11, and it will be those parallel sessions, so you will find them on your agenda. Thank you very much.